Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Kenza, for coming and participating in our panel discussion on climate crisis. How do we prepare for it? How do we anticipate climate crisis? What we can do to make this climate crisis easily adjustable? These are the questions that we are going to focus on, and the first one is for both of you. Anna, you can start and talk to us about how should we anticipate climate crisis, what are the steps that we need to take in order to adjust or to survive climate crisis.
Thank you, first of all, for the invitation, and of course, for your countries, very, very hard and complicated, because when devastation arrived yet, it's very hard to find and try to solve the problem, because everything becomes emergency. And of course, these kind of problems should be anticipated before to create such a dramatic disasters. So I believe that first of all, we have to redesign the paradigms through design for living in our planet. Because climate devastations affect specific areas sometimes, but in the meantime, it's a problem that we have to afford as a collectivity and not as individual. So future studies should really redesign the paradigms, because till now design worked mainly, I believe, for the elite, for the rich part of the world, and this is unsustainable. So this is also the reason why we are moving so fast to the climate change, because elite doesn't stop to abuse of the sources. So I think that we have really and strongly to work on a problem like climate changes, migrations, health, as a unique community, worldwide community. And I believe that future studies will help to envision the problems, to create scenarios, affordable scenarios for everyone. And I think so.
Kenza, if you can address the same issue, that'd be great.
Yeah, I would actually also would like to start by thanking you for hosting me here and giving me a bit the word. Thank you very much, Anna, for what you just said, because I will completely second what you say. It's about indeed redesigning and aiming to preserve and regenerate our common goods, actually, and to redefine what are our common goods instead of continuing that privatization or that limiting behavior towards overexploitation or towards destruction, actually. So anticipating climate change, I would say, start first by recognizing, obviously, that is happening and that it has disastrous impacts on different levels of our systems. Also acknowledging that we're within an interrelated system where elements and at different scales, human beings, environment within are obviously connected to each other, and it's a dynamic system that needs really to be taken into account fully and holistically. And based on that, this idea of redesigning really aims at acknowledging those dynamics within and truly enable like a transformation or a transition or something that would arise that would then contribute to not only facing a climate crisis, but also mitigating potentially this climate crisis. And the way we see that now, if I'm focusing mostly on food system, because food system is also what connects us all and behave as well on those multi-levels, be it on the soil, like if we start on the ground with the landscape, with the lands, with the water that is required, with all those elements, but then we touch human beings, human population, livelihoods, also our food cultures, our our way to relate actually to the earth and to our culture and our society. Then if we take food system, indeed, recognizing that the way it's done at the moment is obviously unsustainable and actually contributes to emphasize this climate crisis, but it also has a very strong role of potentially also mitigating or limiting this climate crisis or reacting to it in a resilient and sustainable way. Then if we think in that interconnected way, then anticipation can be supported by, for example, what we call agroecology, which is, I'm diving directly into this because then we can, of course, elaborate a bit on it. But it's really this idea of facing food insecurity in a resilient and in a sustainable way. So yeah, that's a first short answer to the way things are and should be.
Thank you, Kenza. Both of you have talked about changing the paradigm and redesigning our world to sustain climate change or to endure climate change. But when we talk about redesigning, there are power brokers who are very strong, as Anna has mentioned, the elites of the world. They are making the rules, and when you want to change it, which we saw in COP26 and COP27, the pressure group, the youth were very vocal. They have been vocal for some time, but yet we do not see any kind of material results or conclusion at the end of it. Even this year in COP27, Pakistan had asked for help from the world because we have we need about $30 billion. There is $16 billion of losses in, I mean, that includes human lives, livestock, crops, homes, and it is devastating. Now, despite the fact that Pakistan contributes less than 1% in carbon emission, but we are impacted by it very badly, which is not manageable even for the government today. Despite the demand for climate justice, at the end of the conference, we did not see any fund which was given to Pakistan. And the situation during the climate crisis usually is such that you need food right then and there. So if I do not have food given today, I will not be able to eat today. So if I am told that the aid will come or the help will come or the money will come 3 months from now, that means this is 3 months without food, without medicine, without shelter for me. So the urgency of it, and for the climate justice, how do we make those elites change their ways? Because that is the toughest question. It is about changing the power dynamics. And youth is definitely doing a lot, but it is not translating into the funding and the policies that will create a sustainable climate. So Anna, if you want to take it up first, or Kenza, whoever.
I agree with you, and because what is now is that it seems that future is going to be a luxury. You know, I'm now following some projects for the refugees in Ukraine. You know, they have actually problem of energy. They're freezing there. Winter is arriving, and the bureaucracy and the time of the decision is so long that they do not consider that the people needs, as you said, now in the present, and their future is so short that we are denying them the future. And this is only because it's the perspective of the rich countries that do not have this kind of urgency. So first of all, I think that I don't want to say something political, but design is also political. We should create critical mass of people. The big percentage of the people needs something, and the decision should go in their hands. Otherwise, we continue to be moved only by finance. And this is unacceptable because human life has a value and is not something related to stock exchange. That is the logic that the neocapitalism and the neoliberalism adopted in the last years. And I think that this is behind the acceleration of the disasters. But then I believe also that there are some questions that are quite important and future studies should move and should be also important for change the paradigms. The first is migrations. Wars and climate crisis is moving thousands of people, and this means a lot of things. This is for me the hugest disasters, because first it means to decontextualize the people and to have a lack of culture and desertification of part of the world. This is unacceptable because desertification is a process that continues, devastating cultures, countries, and lands. No, Kenza was talking about food. Food means agriculture means to stay there and to live and to create communities around and to create an economy around that. So migration is completely deleting all this kind of system, and we have to force the government to go back and to stay. We are 8 billions of people. Millions of people on the world. So we should really be everywhere and restart the use of the space as a local economy. And this is very, very important. Another point where we have really to work strongly is to reduce the abuse of the artificial places, because since we have in this very hard climate crisis, and we are going to enter in a harder one, people will start living more and more into closed spaces, no? And so in artificial spaces, and so in decontextualized space. And this is also unsustainable in terms of climate, in terms of economy, in terms of inclusion, because who is excluded and who is included into this system. So we are creating a sort of duty-free around the world, no, where people will live in this international rich way of living, and the rest of the people and the rest of the world should stay out of this system. And this is unacceptable, and is also unacceptable because when we create these artificial spaces, when we create a artificial mountain to ski in the middle of the desert, we really are abusing of the nature. So when we work on the future studies, we should be disruptive and not creating super artificial, but we have to go back and to create a very agricultural and economical system. And so for me, when you work in these artificial spaces, and when you believe the only belief is the technology and not the human needs, then you have no places and you have no time, because you even do not consider anymore the circadian system. And this is the first, the start of the ruin, the start of the problems. And I teach time-based design. And I believe that if we work on time, we understand that how much we waste energy, how much we waste spaces, how much we live in oversized spaces. And so we have, again, to think the different times that our societies are living now. We are forced in one time, and that is the productive one, and that kind of production. And so we really have to rebalance and to redesign the times, and according to our needs, according to the nature, and not following the imperialistic time of the neoliberalistic market. This is what I believe and what I work with my students. Just to close, for instance, we design buildings that 80% of their time they're empty. This is unsustainable. We have to design, to build, and we have to try to use the space as much as we can, avoiding to build and to continue to build architecture everywhere without any consideration of the site of the system. So I strongly believe that time is one of the new paradigm where we have to work and to study and to research for future studies.
And I would follow up on this, because actually starting with this time consideration, what we then start to approach is also a life cycle of products and services. And when we look at that lens, addressing and assessing the life cycle of a product, then oftentimes what we can extract from it is also their environmental footprint or their water footprint. And this is actually a fundamental tool, I think, or a quite interesting tool that we have in our hands, or at least scientists have in their hands, to make decisions, or at least to guide decisions. And within that enable us to see also exactly what you were mentioning, Anna, regarding building buildings that won't be used. How can we produce food that won't be eaten? How can we face all that waste that is continuously generated by the system, by the way the current system has been designed? And so again, I would totally second you on way to optimize actually the purpose, the service, the product that we're that we have. And here again, I'm bringing it to food, but what does it mean now for people that are in need, and how to face this emergency? Like for a while, I think that food system issues, or at least feeding world's population, was often related to this narrative of the population is rising and we need to produce more, and a bit kind of a Malthusian type of way to see that. However, what we realize now, it's not a question of production. We produce much more calories than the world needs, but it's about accessibility, affordability of nutritional food, and it's about making that food available to the people in need, actually. And I think that starting to change a bit also this narrative, those narratives around our well, how food should be produced, how food should be eaten, to what extent people in certain places have more access to certain particular nutritional food. When I say nutritional, I think it's very important here, because it's not only about feeding in terms of calories, it's really about having access to things that to then wholesome food that would connect us to the ground, that would enable us to really feel grounded where we are or where we could be, because yeah. And so we're shifting here from borrowed productivist narratives to narrative that then will be much more critical, asking ourselves then, yes, who are the big players? Who are the actors involved? Who benefit or no from those dynamics? And so here, again, if I'm bringing this magical term that I'm going to start to define again, when we link sustainable food and agricultural system to agroecological concept, the idea here is not only to stick to the science that I mentioned, that it's bringing us tools for decision makings, but obviously to practice. What do you do on field? Like here, when we have that land, when the land exists, how can you practice in a way that then would make sure that it would feed us, that would respond to our need in a sustainable way? And ultimately, the third pillar to that is the social movement. And here I think that this social movement is fundamental for things to change, for a transition to happen. And there are many theories of how transition will happen, but indeed taking into account or acknowledging the need for circular economies, the need for solidary economies that would be embedded in food cultures and tradition, that would be embedded in human values and our diets, that would be embedded in a more efficient, more synergetical way, more holistic way to produce and to connect then all of those elements. So yeah, here what we have here is as a bit of framework, but also like a chance or a possibility to change again, or to shift from this other narrative that we have, that is technology would save us all, you know, or like let's wait for technology fix. Because within that paradigm of technology versus what we have, or what we're trying to preserve as well, what is happening is a bigger gap created. And so what we need is indeed to stop escaping, hoping that the technology would save us all, but actually reconnect to what we have and to the land we have and to the way we produce, acknowledging that the technology could actually be better ways to handle water in a very simple way, like mulching or putting, you know, cover crops, and that should be acknowledged as a technology instead of waiting for the robot to address those things. And so here it brings us to the people, to human beings that are the majority, that are the constituent of our system and of our food system, to the many smallholder farmers that holds indigenous knowledge that needs to be acknowledged. This knowledge needs to be put at the same level as some of the scientific knowledge that has been imperialist and way too colonial in essence, that have been created, those hierarchy of thoughts. And by building those hierarchy of thoughts, then it just had again created another bigger gap between human beings. So here we're facing kind of two big gaps, this human and nature, and this human and human gaps, and all of this well needs obviously a proper thinking, but can only dismantle if we address those questions critically, and if we support all of those questions with social movements.
Okay. I mean, we have already talked about, Kenza, you had started with that we are interconnected and we are interdependent. That's how ecological systems are. And you said that there is a gap between human and nature, and humans and humans. And I guess, like, I mean, this is absolutely correct. And that is what is creating all these crises, including the climate crisis, which is a result of human activities, and only collective human activity can resolve it or overcome it. Now, this brings me to the emerging trends in your field. So Anna, if you could talk about the emerging trends in your field, in architecture, maybe, what kind of sustainable architecture trends that you are seeing? What is a cheaper kind of shelter that you can create? How do you make our building, our small houses more resilient, more sustainable in such climate crisis? Please, Anna, if you could address it.
Right. I think that mostly the people work on materials. That, of course, is correct. So architecture is working on finding sustainable material, and sometimes they work. There is another trend, very important, that is working on the 3D printer. So the idea that you do not waste materials, and you also do not create pollution during the construction site, because when we think about sustainability, we think about the life cycle, or the life of the building, but we do not consider how much pollution we create when we build it. But for instance, we are working as our department with some companies, and we are trying even there to change the paradigm, because what is interesting in the life cycle assessment is also the operational part. How do people use those spaces? And so we are trying also to introduce these paradigms of time, how people work in order to manage in a correct way the quantity of energy that we really need. Even in the offices, this is very important. So, but this is, let's say, in a normal condition. What I think you are asking is about the Pakistani situation, so in the emergency. And I could say what we are exploring during these days because for Ukraine, and the idea is to create shelter that are easy to be built with material that embed into some, for instance, panels, all the equipments that we need, like electricity, water pipes, and things like that. And but what we thought, because we in Italy we had a lot of earthquakes, and the problem arrives, so it's unpredictable. But on the same time, we know that we have continuously this kind of problems. So what we are thinking together with the National Center of Research, that every town should have and should build in, let's say, peaceful, in normal period, a sort of storage of temporary housing to host at least 100,000 of people, even living spaces close to the towns, where wherever it happened, we can build immediately, we can arrange immediately places for hosting people, for giving them sustainable energy. So to use photovoltaic, we are in Italy, so we have sun and we can do it. So the idea is to think a strategy behind it, because 2 days ago, one hill came down in the south of Italy, and a lot of people died. And every time they think, the government, they think about the problem when the problem exists. So the idea is that future studies should enter in the head of the governments, because we have through all the skills that the future studies give the possibility to understand the different scenarios and different situations. So we can help them to start thinking how to prepare everything in case there will be an emergency, as for you. I understand that the number of people without homes that you mentioned before is amazing. It's something that unbelievable. And what I'm sorry personally is that sometimes we are updated on silly informations and not in such important information as no one is talking about Pakistan, because now the news are so continuous, and let's say every news cannibalizes the other one. So I think it's very important also to create a network of universities to be ready when something like that exists and happen, to help and to start to build a very temporary shelter to host the people in this situation.
Thank you, Anna. Kenza, I would like to know about the trends in your field, especially food security. And also, you talked about the nutritional value of the food. And there is a very serious crisis of malnutrition in Pakistan. And considering that we don't even have sufficient food, and the food that we have available is not nutritious, how do we solve this problem? And also talk about the trends that you see in food security.
Yeah, well, thank you for this question, because I think it's a fundamental one actually as well. The first word concept that comes into my mind is diversity. Actually, it's how over the last decades this element of diversity have been lost for the profit of productivity. So we've seen all around the world emerging very industrial agriculture that would be that would aim to kind of simplify a bit the way we do the production. But by simplifying it, we actually overexploit whatever resources are at the service of this production. And what happened then is a considerable loss of diversity in terms of product that were growing, in terms of seed. With the loss of this diversity, we lost also sovereignty on the seed that were used, on the food that is produced and consumed. And that brings us also to the power debate that Anna brought regarding, well, obviously the power structure, who holds the power over what, and knowing that at the moment, 85% of the seeds that are used and traded in the world belongs to 5 main companies, and those big 5 companies, they're also the one handling agricultural input. So here, indeed, we're facing a reduction or an over-reduction and over-simplification in terms of what we produce and how we use, that then have a very detrimental impact also on our health and on the way we feed ourselves. And that brings us to indeed this question of malnutrition. That is, it's not only, well, also over the world, but it's not only that we face food insecurity or undernutrition, but we also have hidden hunger. So many key elements that we should find in our food, we don't find it anymore. And even if you can not seemingly see it, but it's still here within our bodies. And then obviously on top of it, malnutrition and what are the big mechanisms around malnutrition? Is it again the access? Is it the affordability of nutritional food that then is questioned? And all in all here, what I'm trying to say is we've been facing a huge reduction in diversity of production, of producing system, of feeding, of our meals, of like all along this food system actually. And I would say that one of the emerging trend would be to refocus on this diversity, refocus on biodiversity preservation, try to understand how can we have cropping system, farming system that would evolve around this diversity. Actually, the background image that I have here, I don't know if any of you recognize, but I'm getting lost. But it's a coffee trees. But then what we have under is actually potato. What we have on top of it is shade trees. So it's really like a complete and dynamic agroforestry system that tries to integrate many edible or non-edible crop. And this is in a small farm in Kenya, but here the idea is really to think beyond this oversimplification of agriculture that led to disastrous consequences. And with that, again, I'm bringing like emerging trends is something that would seem very simple, but is basically giving the voice to the human beings, to the people that are related to that. So here I would say, in our field is transdisciplinary research. To what extent practitioners, scientists, any type of stakeholder linked to a system can be listened and can be heard, and can be acknowledged for the knowledge they share, and they have. And so transdisciplinary approaches is really a way to indeed question those power structures and to recognize the diversity of knowledge and the diversity of human beings that are somehow directly, indirectly related to the challenge we're facing. With that, then I have to say as well that the idea is to avoid what was heavily and still actually nowadays very surprisingly promoted is this one solution fits all type of approach of saying like, oh, we found one solution, let's apply it to everywhere. And here I would for example, well, give an example of how sometimes those solutions might appear to be something very positive or that would have positive consequences in face of climate crisis, but then in the end completely miss the point of having like a shared common pool of resources such as water or soil. Or when we think about, for example, drip irrigation systems or rain-fed versus irrigated agriculture, a lot of government have pledged for those drip irrigation system because they would be much more efficient. So that would be a way to preserve the water that we have, avoid evaporation, and optimize that. However, if drip irrigation is combined with overexploitation of groundwater resources, then we're here facing a very severe consequence on groundwater table and water availability. So what I'm trying to say here is that sometimes by using the solution that were seemingly good, we're having very negative long-term consequences on nothing. And that brings me to this, again, system thinking, trying to address long-term versus short-term dynamics and try to acknowledge that instead of having a very linear way to do science, that would be, I have a problem, we have a solution, but without connecting it to all the other elements that surround it. And I think that this is now more and more what is happening, thankfully, because they realize that they have been doing continuous mistake on that, but that should be supported by policymakers and with policymakers. So this idea that science should go hand in hand with policymakers, and we realized that over the last few years that oftentimes also there are like different voices and sometimes opposing voices in the way science is done, but also trying to acknowledge then this diversity of opinion and try to combine it as well with obvious evidence. So here it's not about spending too much energy and time questioning climate crisis or whatever, but it's about moving forward and building a vision out of data, out of what we have, but trying to avoid linearities, oversimplification, and be very context specific and acknowledging those complexities. So I would say that they appear in a way simple, but at time as well very challenging, because having to face human beings, having to acknowledge epistemologies and ontologies around science is very challenging. The way we were brainwashed as well, and in a way like imperial science and not decolonial science have been brought to the sphere as a dominant form of science, then becomes very challenging actually. So yeah,
True.
starting here.
That's true. I really appreciate.
I want to add something.
Yes, please go ahead.
I want to add something that I agree absolutely. And I have to say you that I've never been in Pakistan. I travel a lot. But the only things I know about Pakistan is when I've been in the Expo Dubai, the Pakistan pavilion showed this amazing nature and amazing space. And this is a place where first time I thought about biodiversity and the rights for a population, for a country to fight for your biodiversity, because Pakistan is a very amazing country. And I believe that what Kenza said is the core of the question. There is no one unique answers. Yeah. Sometimes the general storytelling is that, oh, we should go with that, and everyone should go with that. No, we should be more and more site specific. The contextualization, the context should take the voice, and I agree with her.
Thank you, Anna. We have a few minutes left, and I would like you guys to close today's discussion. with this question, and please take just a minute to try to think about it and answer it. It's about hope. Are you hopeful about the future of climate driven changes? Do you think we can survive that? And you don't have much time. I wish we had more, but if you can keep your answer to 1 minute. So Kenza, maybe you can start this time around.
Thank you. And I love this question because, well, I want to answer a big yes, actually. Having spending years focusing actually too much on the problem and like, oh, here or there or there, I realized that it wasn't so good, and it was time for me to kind of switch towards solution-oriented, in a way, approaches. And this is when I realized that, well, we talked about social movements, but there is a social movement. We talk about those youth taking, trying to empower themselves and trying to exist in those closed spaces and open spaces and on the street. And that gives me so much hope, because I think that there are many ways, there are many alternatives that have been thought through, that have been shared, that exist, that have been tested. And here the idea is really to kind of, move with that, move with the sense that we're connected, that things are moving forward, we're connected to each other, we're connected to the nature that is around us. And there is this cyclic element that happen no matter what, anyway. and that is very powerful, and actually embracing that. So yeah, I think that there are many reasons to be hopeful, and actually maybe that would be also the strongest way to pursue is with this hope, or with this energy, this creative, empowering energy of hope, of solutions. So that's the most beautiful one I would like to follow.
True. Yes, Anna, please.
I'm also positive, and I'm positive because I'm a professor. So I manage, I work with the young generations, and what I like is that they are banning the word consumer. We should stop to think about consumerism, and we should stop to be consumers, because sustainability doesn't match with the word consumerism.
Absolutely. Thank you both very much. I really appreciate, and I wish you a wonderful time. And I hope that Pakistani people going through this crisis, they have some hope too. And people around, I mean, there's a civil society which has helped them out, tried to help them during the crisis. Government agencies that tried to help them a little bit, but they didn't have enough resources. Now the world can also help us if they have resources. So I like to entertain hope, but looking at the situation during the climate crisis in Pakistan, it is very difficult to stay hopeful throughout. But I thank you both for participating today. Thank you.